AI is taking jobs. We all know that. Many people fear that AI may, in fact, have some kind of Skynet nefarious plot coming soon, and that is certainly possible. There are lots of problems that we could certainly imagine with AI, but what if I told you that I think AI is actually taking souls? That I think AI is, in the more metaphorical sense, of course, removing that which makes humans uniquely human and replacing it with some Wally-esque drone that I don't think any of us wants a part of. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what we will be talking about today here on the Watchdog. Good evening, friends, and shalom, and welcome to this episode of The Watchdog, hosted, of course, exclusively on the Synagogue News. I am your host, CJ Cox, here to tell you that we are, in fact, living in biblical times. And if we have anybody here in the live chat, I want to say brief shaloms to you all. Thank you very much for being here. We certainly do appreciate your view. If you are here, please remember to like and share this video. Please consider subscribing to the channel. If you have not done so, hit that bell to get notified every single time that we go live. And remember, you can post any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature in the comment section down below or in the live chat, though I rarely get to the ones in the live chat if I'm being perfectly honest with you. If you would like to support the work we do, you can follow us on various social media platforms. I am on Gab, Facebook, Twitter, Minds, Truth Social, and MeWe at the tag The Synagogue. Certainly appreciate anybody who is following us on those platforms. Please be sure, if you do frequent those platforms, to be sharing this video to those platforms, as well as getting it with your friends, family, co-congregants, co-workers, and anybody else you think may benefit from our broadcast this evening. If you like this channel, do remember that we are a conservative talk show, and so it is very likely that stuff that we talk about is going to offend the YouTube algorithm, going to offend the YouTube overlords. So we have a second channel over on Rumble. There are two reasons you should subscribe to the Rumble channel. Number one, if something does end up getting removed from this channel, then it will still be uploaded on the Rumble channel. But number two, if this channel actually gets completely removed from YouTube, which is something that I fear is increasingly likely as time goes on, the channel will still be up on Rumble, and we will still be uploading on Rumble. Videos are posted after the fact, so they don't actually come up live. It is same day, though. So if anybody's interested in that, please do look us up at the Synagogue there on Rumble. Certainly do appreciate anybody who's supporting us there. Also, remember, you can support the work that we do here by subscribing to our Patreon. We have had a bi-weekly blog on hiatus there that will finally be posting a new entry of this Saturday. The blog there is called Blogladite. If you're interested, this Saturday I'm going to be talking about the quasi-Messianism that we see, by which I mean Messiah complex, that we see in the Republican Party today, really in both parties. But I want to specifically speak about what's going on in the Republican Party because I am a conservative. I understand a lot of people like Donald Trump. I understand that he is in many respects better than the alternative. And I don't really have a solution for you guys because, realistically speaking, something must be done about the Biden regime. But much like in 2016, I'm getting very uncomfortable. And I think that it's worse this time around than it was last time around, if I could be completely honest with you. So I'm going to be writing an article on that. If you are interested, $10 monthly gives you full access to Blogladite. And also, if you want to give anything less or more than that, you can certainly do so. Less, of course, you won't get the perk. More will just be gravy on top. And I certainly appreciate anybody who's contributing to the work we do there. All right. Our history fact for the day. For those who don't know, we like to do a This Day in History. little factlet or factoid or whatever you call it every day every time we do these watchdogs. So for today, what I wanted to let you guys know about is that on February the 22nd, 1862, the permanent Confederate Constitution was put into effect, right? So for those who do not know, it was on February the 8th, 1861, that the provisional Constitution of the Confederate States of America went into effect. It was on this day, that would be, excuse me, why am I saying October? February the 22nd of the next year, 1862, that the permanent Constitution was put into place. And of course, just a couple days before that, Jefferson Davis had been inaugurated for his 6-year term. He had already been the interim president since the beginning of the provisional government, but now he was elected the official president of the Confederate States of America. And it is at this point that the Confederate States of America's government could really be said to be official and, at least in their eyes, permanent. Of course, it did not turn out to be that way. Give it only 3 years, and the Civil War would make sure that they would not be permanent in any form or fashion. But nevertheless, it was certainly a very interesting fact in history that I learned today. And by the way, that document in and of itself is a very interesting document. Obviously, I think our United States Constitution is better, so I don't want to get anybody twisted up here. But both the Provisional Constitution and the Permanent Constitution of the Confederacy are very interesting reading for those who are interested in political theory, and specifically in American political theory, of course, because it was the view of at least 11 different states in the 1860s, right? And it's interesting to go through our history and to see how political philosophy has evolved both regionally and nationally. I would certainly recommend you guys read that. And in fact, I'll probably be placing a link in the description. I have to do the description up anyway, because if you're watching this live, I don't have a description right now. I'm going to have to edit the description anyway. I might present a link to both of those documents in the description just to give you guys some good reading if you're interested, right? Who knows? Maybe you're not interested. I found it interesting. Today, 1862, that was 160 years ago to the day, is the day that the permanent Confederate Constitution was put into effect. It's also Saudi Founding Day. That's right. Today is the day that Saudi Arabia celebrates its founding. So that's very interesting. We won't go into too much detail on that because I frankly don't care that much, but it's interesting nonetheless. We have a very interesting show for you guys today, at least I believe so. We're going to be talking about artificial intelligence and why I would consider myself an anti, which is just this little not so clever anagram, or not anagram, a name that I came up with. I'll just put it here on the screen for you guys. Anti, right? It's anti-AI, but of course the AI, combination of letters makes the I sound, and so anti, haha, very funny, Jay, I know. But anyways, I want to explain to you guys why I am anti-AI and why I think AI is in fact going to be ripping the very soul out of America and out of the human race. I recently read, in fact, just earlier this morning, I read The Abolition of Man again by C.S. Lewis. And of course, he is speaking about ultimately at least, he is speaking about man's conquest of nature and how nature ultimately is going to be subjugating us by way of us subjugating it, right? And he starts to talk about how there's going to be these man builders, for lack of a better term, who are going to be shaping man, and man, I mean, is in the human race, in their own image, once they, to their own satisfaction, have conquered or understood and are able to manipulate human consciousness, human values, and what it means to be human. And I thought it was very interesting that after I had read that, I ended up reading a series of articles on artificial intelligence. And so basically, that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about various articles surrounding artificial intelligence. I want to talk about why we should be anti-artificial intelligence, why this channel is going to be consistently anti-artificial intelligence. I don't believe AI art is art. I don't believe AI writing from ChatGPT is legitimate art in the writing sense, in the creative sense, right? And not in the actual drawing sense, obviously. I think that I have a real worry that AI is going to take everybody's jobs. And I have a real worry that with the combination of our artistic and intellectual endeavors being taken over by AI, as well as the things we do laboriously, that is with our hands, being taken over by AI, I have a very genuine fear that will end up being, as I said earlier, a kind of ripping out of the soul of the human race. And I also kind of think it might be inevitable. I don't know if there's anything we can do to stop it. So this is going to be a depressing episode. I have titled it AI and the Abolition of Man, and I will go ahead and put that up right now. I may end up writing an article on this on Blogger at some point where I go into even more detail, but nevertheless, that's what we're talking about. Hope you guys enjoy. Let me go ahead and share my first article here today. And we want to start with some of the Skynet stuff, right? Which I don't actually have as much of a worry about that kind of threat from AI as other people might. But it's not a completely unfounded worry. And I do think, bare minimum, weaponized AI will be used by nefarious actors to try and keep the majority of humanity down, if not the majority of certain nations down, namely those nations which end up having AI introduced to them en masse. Now, this article is old. Okay, it's almost a year old at this point. June 8th, 2023 is when it was posted. It's posted from the website Reuters, which you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with. And it is referencing another article that was posted roughly a month prior, where in a simulation, an AI drone killed its human operator. Right? Now, this did not really happen. It was all a simulation. Nobody actually died as a result of this. But what was demonstrated was that AI does actually have the capacity and the willingness, if that's what you'd like to call it, to turn on its human handlers and eliminate them, execute them, get rid of them, delete them, whatever you'd like to say, right? And this is the response that the operator, the Air Force operator, had to that, basically trying to do some damage control, which I found quite interesting. So I want to read this, and then I want to go into the things which I think are the greater fear. But I still want to reference this because it's still a legitimate threat with AI, and it's still something that I think we should be on the lookout for. And as I said, I am very anti-AI, and I'm getting more and more convinced that we should be anti-AI as things move forward, or anti, as I have said, anti-AI, whatever, right? Anyway, the article is titled Simulation of AI Drone Killing Its Human Operator Was Hypothetical, Air Force Says. And again, this was posted on June the 8th, 2023, excuse me, on the website Reuters. Hope you guys enjoy this little tidbit of information. The United States Air Force, or USAF, official, who spoke about a simulation where an artificial intelligence, AI, drone killed its human operator, later said that he misspoke and that the simulation never really happened, but online posts continued to share the story after the clarification. In May, Tucker Cinco Hamilton, the USAF agent of AI test and operations, spoke at the Future Combat Air and Space Capabilities Summit hosted by the UK's Royal Aeronautical Society in London. And you can see, once you guys are able to get a link to that, the full lecture, I guess, for lack of a better term, with the link here. So if you guys are, and maybe I'll just post that as its own separate link once I do all the editing there. Hamilton's comments during the summit can be read on the RAES summary of the events. See AI is Skynet here already section. And they have an archive here, which I will also post in the description below. Sorry about that. He was quoted as saying, quote, "We were training it in a simulation to identify and target a SAM threat. And then the operator would say, yes, kill that threat. The system started realizing that while they did identify the threat at times, the human operator would tell it not to kill that threat, but it got its points by killing that threat. So what did it do? It killed the operator. It killed the operator because that person was keeping it from accomplishing its objective," end quote. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read that quote again because it's obviously not an example of misspeaking. There is a level of misunderstanding in that people were reporting this as if it was actually happening, and it is clearly a simulation, but it is clearly not misspeaking. It's a very deliberately crafted sentence, right? He says, "We were training it in simulation to identify and target a SAM threat. And then the operator would say, yes, kill that threat. The system started realizing that while they did identify the threat at times, the human operator would tell it not to kill that threat. But it got its points by killing that threat. So what did it do? It killed the operator. It killed the operator because that person was keeping it from accomplishing its objective, and by implication was keeping it from accruing those points, which it got by taking out its objective, right? Or by taking out its target, I guess I should say. And that's the quote. But it ended a while ago, but I was just adding a little bit of commentary there to clarify, right? Anyways, on June the 2nd, so I guess it was a little bit less than a month, sorry. The RAES updated that section, quoting Hamilton as saying he misspoke and that the simulation was a hypothetical thought experiment from outside the military. The updated quote from Hamilton says, quote, "We never run that experiment, nor would we need to in order to realize that this is a plausible outcome," end quote. Now, this is the main reason why I wanted to share this article, is because even in their redacted version where they're saying, hey, no, this is just a, and actually, I think I'm even misspeaking here when I say it's a simulation. It appears upon rereading this that I might have misunderstood, and that this is actually saying this was a thought experiment we were considering, but not actually a simulation that was run. But certainly nobody died. That part is very clear. But even despite that, even despite the backtracking, and even despite the basically trying to do some damage control here, right? I think is the best way to put it. They're still saying we don't actually need to run this experiment to realize this is a plausible outcome. Notice not possible outcome, but a plausible outcome, meaning that it's actually likely, in their opinion, that this could end up happening. So, in other words, to just kind of cut away all the fluff, what they're saying here is, hey, we may not have actually run this experiment, but we think it is likely that AI, if it gets points from killing a human target and we tell it not to, may realize that getting rid of us allows it to take out that target and therefore complete its mission and accrue some of these points, right? And important to note that this is not like some conspiracy theory site or something like that, like InfoWars, right? And I don't even mean to disrespect InfoWars there, but it's just to say, this isn't, it's not even a partisan site like Daily Wire or Vatican News is obviously the official news organization of the Vatican City. Anything like that, right? It's nothing like that. It's Reuters, which is not partisan, not officially like what is that? Operated by a nation or political party or a certain, government industry or big business or something like that, right? And it's not run by a bunch of conspiracy theorists either. And the quotes that we're getting are actually coming directly from the United States Air Force. And obviously, we're going to provide all these links for you in the description down below. These are all important to realize, because I think when people hear this kind of stuff, they immediately think conspiracy theory. They immediately think, oh, this is just people trying to fearmonger, right? This is just alarmists. This is just people trying to obscurantists, as C.S. Lewis would put it, right? People who are trying to say, oh, well, if we continue to go this far, how bad could it possibly get? That kind of thing, right? And that's not actually true in this scenario, right? Or in this situation, rather. What is true is that the United States government has a legitimate fear of AI killing its, quote, handlers, right? They even think it's plausible. Let's continue. Hamilton was also quoted as saying, quote, "Despite this being a hypothetical example, this illustrates the real-world challenges posed by AI-powered capability," end quote. Anne Stefanik, a Department of the Air Force spokesperson, said the USAF, quote, "has not conducted any such AI drone simulations and remains committed to ethical and responsible use of AI technology," end quote, confirming the story presented by Hamilton was from a hypothetical thought experiment and not a simulation. He, of course, very clearly said it was a simulation and not a thought experiment, but nevertheless, perhaps he did misspeak there. Who knows, right? I kind of think it reeks to me a little bit like backtracking and cover up, but let's just take his word for it for I don't know, argument's sake, I guess. An Instagram post shared after these clarifications, however, said, quote, "Were you there when they took over?" And the link is right there. I'll again provide this particular article in the description, and you'll be able to click these links for yourself. Another example says, in part, literally Skynet, link provided, likely referencing the AI computer system that became self-aware in the famed film franchise The Terminator, and they provide a link to that as well. Some of the posts share a Vice article with the headline, AI-controlled drone goes rogue, kills human operator in USAF simulated test, link provided. But the story and headline have since been updated to clarify that Hamilton said he misspoke. Notice the verdict from the Reuters fact checkers. The story was missing context. The story about a USAF official speaking about an AI drone killing its human operator in a simulation is real, but the official has since walked back his comments, and the USAF says the simulation was never conducted. The article was produced by the Reuters. This article was produced by the Reuters fact check team. Read more about our work to fact check social media posts. All right, so my feelings on this are that it does seem a little suspicious, but I'm willing to take his word for it. And it doesn't really matter if the simulation was run or not, or if anybody actually died or not, because ultimately we still end up at the exact same conclusion, right? We took the scenic route, but we ended up in the same place. And the place that we ended up at is there is a legitimate and even plausible threat, according to the United States Air Force, that AI weaponry could and in fact probably would turn on its human handlers if it felt like its human handlers were preventing it from taking out a armed target. That is incredibly worrisome to me. It's incredibly problematic to me. And while I don't put Skynet at the very top of my personal worries as it pertains to AI, I do think that is something that should be considered. And I do think that bare minimum, the problem, which I do think is very likely, which is somewhat adjacent to this, is one we should take very seriously, which is that I think governments and potentially even illegitimate organizations like gangs and cartels and such could absolutely use drones, AI, robotics, things of that nature to take out human beings. They certainly are willing to do that sort of thing. And the AI could even operate somewhat independently from its handlers, which of course could create tons of collateral damage. So I think this is something worth considering. And I really don't have anything else to say about it besides that. But let's move on to the next article here, because I do want to get through all of this kind of stuff rather quickly. I'd like to keep these videos under an hour. Remember, if you are here, please remember to like and share the video. Consider subscribing if you have not done so. Hit the bell to get notified every time we go live. And leave any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, anything like that in the comment section down below. Thank you very kindly. All right, next article here, also from Reuters. This one was actually much more recent. It was posted about 2 days ago. Neuralinks, and this is not directly related to AI, but it is related to the same flavor of problem, if you will. Which I would say that this technological, I don't want to call it an apocalypse, but this technological threat that we are facing has a couple different branches. Okay, there's the AI branch, which is probably the most severe because it impacts all the others. There is the cybernetic, not cybernetic, sorry, maybe it is cybernetic is the word I'm looking for, but the cyborg threat, we could say, humans melding themselves to technology. There is the robotics threat, right? And I think there is also the threat of things like drones and stuff like that, which we will not be hitting on here too severely, or too deeply, rather. At any rate, this article is, again, from Reuters, published originally on February the 20th, 2024. That is 2 days from the time of us uploading this video. It says, Neuralink's first human patient able to control mouse through thinking, Musk says. Again, Neuralink's first human patient able to control a mouse through thinking. Now, for those of you who do not know what Neuralink is, okay, first and foremost, it is a company run by Elon Musk. The same guy who runs, obviously, X, formerly known as Twitter. Same guy who founded PayPal. Same guy who runs Tesla, etc. Right? Neuralink is a neurotechnology company, and its aim is essentially to develop computer chips, right? That would be placed inside the brain that essentially would connect you with not only the internet itself, but also with the technology around you. The specific name for these chips is an implantable brain-computer interface, or a BCI, right? And the company, which was initially founded, I believe, in 2016, is basically dedicated to building these BCIs, and they have officially moved on to human trials of these BCIs, which is what you're seeing here. Now, according to Musk, the first human patient ever to have one of these trials tested on them is now actually able to control his mouse via thought alone, obviously through the conduit of this BCI. So let's go ahead and read a little bit deeper into that. The first human patient implanted with a brain chip from Neuralink appears to have fully recovered and is able to control a computer mouse using their thoughts, the startup's founder Elon Musk said late on Monday. Quote, progress is good, and the patient seems to have made a full recovery with no ill effects that we are aware of. Patient is able to move a mouse around with the screen by just thinking, end quote, Musk said in Spaces events on social media platform X, which of course he owns. Okay, so this BCI is actually managing somehow, I don't know how because I'm not a scientist, managing to transmit the patient's thoughts into the technology in such a way that they're actually able to control the computer mouse on the screen using only their thoughts. The thoughts are somehow being converted to actual commands, and thereby are they moving this mouse on the screen, right? Musk said Neuralink was now trying to get as many mouse button clicks as possible from the patient. Neuralink did not immediately reply to Reuters' request for further details. The firm successfully implanted a chip on its first human patient last month after receiving approval for human trial recruitment in September, which really is when we should have been talking about this, and I apologize for dropping the ball on that. The study uses a robot to surgically place a brain-computer interface implant in a region of the brain that controls the intention to move, Neuralink has said, adding that the initial goal is to enable people to control a computer cursor or keyboard using their thoughts. One more time, just so you guys are able to grasp the raw science fiction becoming science fact that you are currently witnessing. The study uses a robot to surgically place a brain-computer interface implant in a region of the brain that controls the intention to move, Neuralink has said, adding that the initial goal is to enable people to control a computer's cursor or keyboard using their thoughts, which is obviously not the end goal. It is just the first step, but you get the idea. Musk has grand ambitions for Neuralink, saying it would facilitate speedy surgical insertions of its chip devices to treat conditions like obesity, autism, depression, and schizophrenia. Neuralink, which was valued at about $5 billion last year, has faced repeated calls for scrutiny regarding its safety protocols. Reuters reported last month that the firm was fined for violating U.S. Department of Transportation rules regarding the movement of hazardous materials. If anybody would like us to do a look into that article, please do let me know. The story has been refiled to correct the comment that says no ill effects to not neutral effects in paragraph 2. All right, so this is another very interesting develop in this technological devolution that we are currently going through. Here, what we are seeing is basically, I mean, it's exactly what it says, right? The Neuralink company, which aims to implant these BCIs in human beings, thus taking us the first step towards genuine cyborgs, right? They've actually had a successful human trial. And the patient in this instance is actually able to move the computer cursor around. They're now trying to make sure it can click things, and they want it to be able to use a keyboard as well. And of course, as time goes on, the idea is that they should be able to help with a much longer list of things. What was listed here was incredibly interesting to me, being obesity, autism, depression, schizophrenia. How exactly they plan on helping with these things, I don't necessarily know, but I think it's interesting for us to keep a look, an eye on. But obviously, another one of the things that is relevant when it comes to this kind of cybernetic stuff is things like uploading consciousness, if such a thing is even possible. things like wireless communication mind to mind rather than through cell phones or stuff like that. Things like being instantly connected to the internet and being able to do a Google search in your brain rather than do a Google search on a computer. Things like trying to cure diseases via cybernetic technology or regenerate, or not regenerate limbs, but give you synthetic limbs via the cybernetic technology and so on and so forth. And a lot of that stuff may seem really positive to you. It certainly does not seem positive to me. I don't want that which makes me human to be consistently reduced as I become more and more like a supercomputer. In fact, I even though I completely disagree with him politically, one of my personal heroes for a very bizarre reason is Congressman Rush Holt, who's an astrophysicist and former congressman from, I believe, the state of Rhode Island, if I remember correctly. It might be New Jersey. It is New Jersey. My apologies. Rush Holt Jr. is the guy who defeated Watson on Jeopardy. He's kind of like, in my opinion, a modern-day John Henry. Very liberal, unfortunately, but that event in and of itself has always endeared him to me personally, right? And one of the reasons that it did is because it was demonstrating that a sufficiently powerful intellect actually could best a supercomputer in a trivial game like Watson. Like Jeopardy. The thing is, that's not always going to be true. And as humanity tries to keep up with AI and robotics consistently taking over jobs, consistently taking over intellectual discourse, consistently taking over art, both art in the more straightforward sense, like sculpting and painting and stuff like that, as well as art in the sense of drawing and, in the sense of writing and poetry and music and stuff like that. It's starting to now take over theology. We see people are coming up with AI-generated sermons, right? As AI consistently starts to take over more of these fields, the only way for people to keep up is going to be by cybernetically enhancing themselves. That is a prediction I'm making here, a bold prediction that's probably going to sound completely insane to some of you guys. CJ's lost his mind, but I think it's legit. I totally think it's legit. And I think companies like Neuralink are going to be the way we push that forward. And the problem with that is twofold. On the one end, if you can't compete with this stuff, well, intellectual discourse, religious discourse, labor, what you do with your hands, and arts are things which make us fundamentally human, right? If you start removing those things, if you start removing our creativity, our creative power, both in the form of labor and in the form of the arts, our abilities to think for ourselves and rationalize for ourselves and come up with these new ideas, this intellectual discourse I keep referencing, our ability to commune with God, at least in our reasoning capacity, you start removing these things from us, you are going to be removing the things which make us human from us outside of a biological level. I'm speaking philosophically here, right? In essence, in other words, which I think is really how you get the worst dystopia of them all. We talk about police states. We talk about, hedonistic societies. We talk about things like the Hunger Games, right? People will talk about 1984. All that's very relevant. You know what the worst dystopia is that nobody ever talks about? It's WALL-E. Yeah, that's right, friends. It's WALL-E. That's what I said. Because in WALL-E, you have human beings who have been conquered through comfort, right? And they have lost that spark that makes them unique creatures on this planet, that makes them image bearers of God. Now, are they still literally image bearers of God? Of course. Are they still literally human? Of course, right? Are they still literally persons? Of course. But they don't operate that way. For all intents and purposes, they're not, right? That is a problem. That is a terrifying reality. And the reason why I say it's the worst of the dystopias is, number one, it's the one that's going to happen. And number two, it's the only one that relies on us improving. It doesn't rely on tyrants, though tyrants will exist. It doesn't rely on criminals, though criminals will exist. It doesn't rely on some form of nuclear holocaust or other apocalyptic event, though those things can certainly happen. No, it relies on humans doing nothing more than advancing and becoming comfortable. That's it. That's all it requires. You stop doing work, you stop making art, you stop thinking, you start communing with the divine. Sooner or later, you're left with nothing but a husk of flesh that biologically speaking is still human and does happen to have greater thinking capacity than the rest of the creatures on this planet, at least in theory. Who knows what kind of long-term damage this kind of thing could do to the brain? We don't have any idea, right? And that is a dystopia that, friends, it's not when it's not if, it's when. It's going to happen. The only way it can be stopped is if we deliberately stop it with a ton of help from God Almighty. And even then, I wonder if that might still be too late. I don't know. I'm being an alarmist right now. I'm being a conspiracy theorist. I'm being crazy. This is my tinfoil hat thing. All right. Pretend this hat's tinfoil. I don't care. I think this is a very legitimate thing. And I'm sorry to be getting on my soapbox and ranting and sounding crazy to you all, but I am 100% convinced that this will 100% happen. And by the way, humans that have sucked themselves dry of everything which makes them uniquely human will be horrible people. We will lose family relation. We will lose empathy for our fellow man. We will be criminal simply out of boredom. We will be hedonistic because when, as C.S. Lewis says, when that which grounds value is gone, all that is left is I want. It's going to be awful, friends. And it's also going to allow the man builders to have complete and total domination over the entire world, quite frankly. Not just individual nations, the entire world. At least the entire, every area of the world that actually goes along with this technological revolution. And that's the one threat. On the other side of that threat, to combat that threat on this side, to combat the WALL-E dystopia that we are just barreling towards right now, will be not to metaphorically make yourself less human by removing intellectual discourse from the communion with the divine and all those things, but to literally remove the things that make you human, to make you more machine than man. On this side, we have WALL-E. On this side, we have steampunk. Or what is that video game that came out the other day? Cyberpunk. Not the other day, a couple years ago. Right? Cyberpunk 2077. In order to push off the problem that is losing that human spark, which is metaphorical, but nevertheless still incredibly dangerous and still very likely to happen. We'll have people taking the Neuralink route, which will be literally removing that human spark. I could just ask the question, at what point do you cease to be human? And I mean that in a literal sense. Hypothetically, let's say you could upload your conscience to the internet or to a memory card of some kind that you could put in a robot or whatever, right? Are you still a human being at that point? I mean, biologically, you're quite literally not, but there's a human consciousness in there. Is there a soul in there? Are you going to remember? Like, are you going to actively be cognizant and aware and have your memories? Or is it going to be like a replication of you that has your memories and stuff like that? You say, okay, CJ, you're going way too far. We're just talking about clicking stuff on a computer screen. Yeah, that's where it starts. That's where it starts. It starts with connecting to the internet. It starts with using microchips to treat depression. It starts with being able to move a cursor and click things on a computer screen. It ends with Cyberpunk 2077. It ends with people slowly but surely replacing themselves with robotics, with technology. Okay? And that is another thing which I am confident in saying, I believe it's not when, it is, or excuse me, if, it is when. It's going to happen. It's not that it might happen. It's going to happen. And I'm going to be very honest with you guys. I know exactly how crazy this sounds. But if I may be so bold, I got a pretty solid track record on this channel. I've been saying for a long time that it's not simply a matter of the media and the educational systems and cheating in elections and all that kind of stuff, but that the American people are genuinely liberal and getting more liberal and getting more godless. That turned out to be right. I've been saying for a long time that Israel-Palestine is going to blow up in increasingly more violent fashion until we reach a head. That turned out to be right. I've been saying for a long time that an Israeli-Saudi alliance against Iran is inevitable. That turned out to be right. I've been saying for a long time that Trump and the Messianic nonsense that he has pulled and the disregard for traditionalism and the disregard for Christian values was going to drag the Republican Party down to such an extent that we will no longer have traditionalists and Christian moralists in politics anymore. That's very slowly, or very rapidly, turning out to be right. I've been saying for a long time we're going to get a UN with teeth. That's happening. I've been saying for a long time you need to watch out for these globalist types. They're going to continuously try to rebuild Earth in their image, a la the WEF. That's turned out to be right. I've been saying for a long time that we were going to have this United Nations of religions and a global get-together of all the different faiths under the banner of the Pope. That's been spectacularly correct. I don't say this to brag, friends. I say this to say, give me a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. We've been saying crazy stuff on this channel for a long time, and it's happening. You want to know why? It's not because we're super geniuses. It's not because we're prophetic. It's not because we're somehow more aware than people. It's because we listen. You read the stuff that they put on paper, and you just simply repeat it to people, and people say you're a conspiracy theorist. I'm sorry if I'm on my soapbox here, friends. This is a problem. I know how it sounds. I also know it is going to happen. It will happen. Okay? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. When will we have cybernetically enhanced humans that are testing the border between how much you can get rid of before you're actually human? When will we have people so utterly removed from the things which make us essentially human that they don't even appear to have that spark of the divine in them anymore? It is when. It is not if. It is when. Say it with me. When. It's going to happen. Unless we collectively decide that we're not going to let it happen. And by the way, frankly, if I can be so bold, I know this isn't a religious channel, but we certainly have a heavy emphasis on religious flavor here. I think the number one way to achieve something like that is first and foremost through prayer. Should we be anti-AI? Absolutely. We should be in prayer first. I understand not a lot of people watch this channel. I hope you take this message seriously. Get this out to other people. Or maybe you think I'm a crackpot. I don't know. Leave questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, critiques, or anything of that nature in the comment section below, as I've said before. But my goodness, friends, it is, and it doesn't even end here. It doesn't even end here. Let's go to, I've been talking about the AI taking jobs, the AI taking art. Well, let's check this out. From Business Insider, October the 1st of 2023, workers are worried about AI taking their jobs. Artists say it's already happening. Fears are growing that AI could replace millions of jobs. It will. Artists say companies are already outsourcing entry-level work to generative AI. They are. They warn that legal and regulatory uncertainty is putting their livelihoods at risk. It is. Let's continue to move forward with this, shall we? Some fear that AI will wreak havoc on the job market. It will. A report by Goldman Sachs in March predicted that as many as 300 million jobs could be disrupted by the new technology. Friends, there are 330 million people in the United States of America. Now, obviously, those 300 million jobs are not solely in the United States of America. I mean, I don't even think there's 300 million people who work right now in the United States of America. But, of course, multiple people have more than one job. Anyway, you get the point. But you can just do the math for yourself as to how big of a problem Goldman Sachs, not CJ Cox, crazy conspiracy theorist at the Synagogue News, think like a Neanderthal, but Goldman Sachs, how much of a problem they think this is. Potentially, at least. For some working in art and design, this future has already arrived. It says, you arrived there. You're supposed to say arrived. Get yourselves an editor, guys. Just kidding. Artists were among the first to encounter generative AI. Image generators such as DALL-E and Stable Diffusion have also quickly gained traction. As the popularity of these tools grows, some artists say work and opportunities have begun to dry up. Eva Torinent has been working as a freelance artist and illustrator since 2019. Late last year, she was shocked to discover that another artist had taken artwork she'd posted on Instagram and used it to fine-tune the AI model Midjourney to produce AI art in her style. The other artist then sold the artwork to a gallery, which is definitely a violation of her intellectual property, by the way. But anyways, quote, "It was hurtful," she told Insider. "My work has been stolen before, but this was a new kind of violating feeling that I haven't felt before," end quote. Since then, she has increasingly encountered generative AI in her work and says that technology is being used to cut corners and costs, leaving freelance artists to pay the price. Quote, "It's scary to see," she said, "but honestly, it feels inevitable," end quote. And by the way, art is a major, and not just drawing, but sculpting and poetry and music and fiction. All these things are a huge pillar of what makes us human. If you don't believe me, go see the cavemen drawings on rocks in France. Okay, we have been artistic since the very beginning of the human race. Okay. For those of you who believe scripture like I do, one of the very first things you see is Jubal making music and Tubal Cain being an artificer with brass and so on and so forth. Artists told Insiders that it's these freelance and entry-level jobs, particularly in film, TV, and gaming, that are increasingly being done by AI. Excuse me here. Quote, "I noticed as early as last summer," that would be the summer of 2023, I believe, "work was starting to dry up a little bit," end quote, said Reed Southen, I don't know how you say that, a concept artist and illustrator who mainly works in the film industry. He said the downturn was partly due to the worsening economy, but that AI likely played a role too. Reed told Insider that he was aware of production companies turning to AI during the blue sky period, where concept artists are brought on to produce mood boards, and flesh out the look of a film. Quote, "AI seems to be taking a big chunk of that work," he said. "Companies can use generative AI to throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and churn out thousands of concepts in an afternoon," end quote. Concept artist and professional illustrator Carla Ortiz told Insider, she's been involved in 3 productions where generative AI had been used at the concept stage. Quote, "I'm a freelancer, and so I charge by the hour. And these things were used in a way that 100% lessened my hours working on those projects," end quote, she said. Quote, "It's being adopted quietly in a lot of different productions. It's alarming," end quote. And my heart goes out to her for the loss of her job. That's obviously another huge threat that I think is coming from AI. But here I want to focus on the fact that the artistic expressions are being taken away from us and given to things, inanimate objects. They don't even exist as far as like persons, right? Eva believes that the shift towards AI-generated concept art is likely to hurt smaller artists at the start of their careers, which is true, by the way. Well-established artists are certainly not going to feel the impact of this immediately, at least. They will eventually. Or they'll die out, and there won't be any more of them left. That's the other thing that is possible. But those who are trying to start a career in art, it certainly will impact them, no doubt. Quote, "The beginning jobs are moving away," she said. "If game companies use Midjourney to generate concept art and mood boards, it cuts off opportunities for up-and-coming artists to get noticed," end quote. Companies using AI to cut costs. While the debate over AI rages, companies are already including it in layoff announcements and using it as an excuse for downsizing. IBM has paused hiring in roles that could be replaced by AI, and BT announced plans to replace 10,000 cut jobs with AI earlier this year. That is not a conspiracy theory, friends. That's what's happening. Something similar is happening in the art world. Ben Zhao, a professor of computer science at the University of Chicago, told Insider that the explosion in generative AI has sparked, quote, "a race to the bottom," end quote, as companies cut expenses and lay off low-level art roles. Quote, "There's a lot of actual replacement going on, but many companies are just using generative AI as a way to argue for downsizing to try to drive down costs and maximize profits," end quote, he said. Reed worries that the economic outlook with the growing presence of AI has created a perfect storm that is pushing away many companies to cut jobs. Quote, I think they're looking at numbers and they're seeing, and they're seeing cost-saving measures, and they're seeing tools that can aid their businesses without necessarily thinking about the human cost, end quote, he said. Now, I know a lot of people might be thinking, okay, I've seen AI-generated art. It kind of sucks, CJ. So what are you actually talking about here as far as this is going to be replacing us? Obviously, I know what the article's saying, but how long can it possibly last when the stuff is just straight up not good? The answer, friends, is it can last quite a long time, actually, because technology gets better with time, right? Technology gets better with time. I'll say it again. Technology gets better with time. When the first car came out, it probably wasn't all that to look at, right? It probably wasn't that great of a vehicle. It probably was actually outperformed by horse and carriage, by bicycle even, right? But of course, it's the year of our Lord 2024, and we are now debating about whether or not our cars, which can take us from one area of California to another area across the country in Maine in a couple of days, should be powered by gasoline or hydrogen or electricity, right? We've moved well past debating about horses, in other words, right? It didn't take that long. The Model T came out, I think, in 1908, if I remember correctly. Don't quote me on that. But not that long ago in the grand scheme of things. In fact, to give you an example of that, if it was 1908, if it was any time after 1902, in fact, my grandfather's father would have been a child at that time, right? It's not that long ago at all. The vanishing opportunities are especially galling, considering that many of the AI image generators artists, let me redo that. The vanishing opportunities are especially galling, considering that many of the AI image generators artists are losing work to, many of the AI image generators artists are losing work to, are trained on artwork scraped from the internet. After she first encountered generative AI, Eva said, I used the Have I Been Trained tool and found that several of her artworks have been used to train AI models. Quote, it's scary to think that somebody could just take my artwork without my consent and train an AI on it, end quote, she said. Quote, without our work, this technology could not exist. It feels like we are being replaced with our own labor, end quote. Artists fear for the future. Carla Ortiz, who is one of the 3 artists who've launched a lawsuit against Stability AI and Midjourney over claims the companies violated copyright laws by scraping their work to train AI models, which, by the way, recently they have, I think, had a victory in that. We'll be talking about that next Tuesday, Lord willing. So she's one of them. Quote, I'm hoping it'll set a very clear precedent on what actions are okay and what actions are not okay when developing these technologies, end quote, Ortiz said. She fears that the uncertainty and concern surrounding generative AI is putting off people from going into careers in the creative industry. Quote, I don't blame them because I'm worried about my job prospects too, end quote. And not for nothing, but I do think that this whole thing is a little bit of an expansion on the modern art problem, but that's a philosophical conversation for another time. I digress. Zhao was also concerned about how generative AI may impact the next generation. In collaboration with artists, he and his team developed Glaze, a tool that applies a filter to digital artworks that prevent AI models from using it to learn an artist's style and reproduce it when prompted, which, of course, somebody will find a way around eventually. Glaze is designed to buy time for legal and regulatory systems to draft new rules on how to deal with AI, he said. Zhao feared for the future of human creativity. Quote, now, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Zhao feared for the future of human creativity. That's what I'm fearing for here, okay? That's the worry I think I'm having here. And it's not just that, of course. Like I said, it is also human intellectual discourse. It is also human creative power in so much as that we are making things like cars and buildings and stuff. It's also humans' ability to commune with the divine, our religious identity. It's also our jobs, the things that we do, right? I fear for a lot of things here. And most of that has nothing to do with AI taking people out, although I started with that just to say, look, that's a legitimate fear we should have about AI as well. Anyways, Quote, "It's a really dark thing to contemplate," end quote. Midjourney and Stable Diffusion did not respond to a request to comment from Insider, and of course they did not, because the companies very rarely do, right? So, so there's that as well. How much time do we have here? 54 minutes. I don't know if anybody's even actually watching this. I know it's I've kind of killed the traffic to this channel by not posting to it enough, so I do apologize for that. But anyways, this is a real threat, friends. What happens when we don't have artists anymore? What happens when we don't have musicians anymore? Obviously, there are going to be people who somewhat rebelliously and nonconformistly, that's not a word, stick to themselves and decide only to make music amongst themselves. But when we get to an age when people, and we're already here, art, movies, video games, intellectual discourse, there's 10 million jobs in the trucking industry. What happens when AI has a near perfect record as far as street safety and stuff like that? All those 10 million people don't have jobs anymore. How do they provide for themselves? And then, of course, you start getting into other questions too, like, does the government have to provide everything for us? Are we going to start having food rations? Are we going to start having UBI? Right? Do you see how bad this could get? This is the true dystopia. AI has allowed abolition of man and police state, which you see in Endgame and other such Alex Jones conspiracy theory documentaries, and 1984 with rewriting history and all that other kind of stuff, and the anthem removing identity, and WALL-E and Brave New World and THX 1138 and all these other things. AI has allowed, Left Behind, etc. AI is what is the missing ingredient that they were all missing. That was lacking from the formula, right? AI is what allows us to funnel it all together and create one absolutely horrifying dystopia. You can throw cyberpunk in there as well. You can throw the Book of Revelation in there as well. In fact, I think that's what ultimately predicted most of this, personally. Heck, who knows? You might even be able to throw things like the Hunger Games in there. After all, idle hands are the devil's plaything, right? AI is the thing that allows us. We know that disease like COVID and things like global warming and stuff like that give them the reason to start having global control and stuff like that. But the mechanism by which we get the worst dystopia, it's here. It's technology. And this is the thing I really fear is, people will say, well, what, do you want to be like the Luddites and say we shouldn't actually move forward? And that's, I guess, theoretically possible. We as a society could collectively decide we're not going to allow this revolution to take place with plenty of help from the Lord. And we've done that before, rarely. In fact, only one time that I can think of. But we, as a species, collectively decided we are not going to throw nuclear bombs at each other, for the time being, at least. We're not going to take the power of a mini star, and just launch it over at China, right? For now, at least. So it's possible, but do you even know of another situation like that, where we, as a human species, just collectively agreed not to let the inevitable march of technological progression move forward? I don't know of another one. And considering that every other example has led us to where we are today, people who warned about the potential pitfalls of the internet, people who warned about the potential pitfalls of the Industrial Revolution, people who warned about the destruction to farming communities and stuff like that, which we'll be talking about much more because it's happening more frequently as we have Californians bleeding in like a cancer to the rest of the country, right? Those people were ignored. And to an extent, you can almost ask, okay, well, how even if you did take them seriously, how do you even move forward with this kind of thing? And I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know if we can avoid this outcome, this dystopia that I am predicting, and that I will continue to scream from the rooftops until people start listening. I see we only have one viewer today, and I haven't seen any comments in the live chat. So maybe I'm just speaking to myself. I don't know. I could be a crazy crackpot. This could be the moment that Jay has finally lost his mind. But I don't think it is. And much like the other things that we've been consistently warning about on this channel, this is going to become a mainstay of this channel. But I don't know. I don't even know what else to say at this point. I guess the only thing I really can say is shalom, friends. God bless you all. In the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, thank you for watching. Be vigilant. Please be vigilant, because these problems are only going to get worse. Please contribute to the work that we do here, as we consistently try to warn about these things. It's crackpot now, but when it's eventually rendered true, I think people will realize just how not crackpot it really is. And, of course, you can subscribe to the Patreon and all that other kind of stuff. But be vigilant. Be watchdogs. Ask yourselves this question. In the face of Armageddon, it is increasingly looking more and more like a dystopian Armageddon. In the face of Armageddon, will you compromise